This is a story that I don't tell often. It's a very, very personal story, and I try to protect my family a little bit. It's like I'm considered the quiet, studious one in the family, but even still, they're, private citizens. They're not out there on stage. I'm a professional storyteller and a comedian, so I talk about everything on stage. But this story, it's important, and so I've told my family I'm telling the story, and it's got some private stuff in it. So just know that this is a story that I don't tell lightly. Um, and there's parts of it that are really disgusting. So you just have to bear with me on this. Um, there's three parts to it. The first part is I used to have this cat, and her name was Checkers, and she was a sweet little thing. She was a tortoise shell, and she was a good little girl, and she loved me every day of her sweet little life. But as she got a little bit older, she got thyroid disease, and then we found out that she had a heart murmur, and then we found out that um, she had bad teeth, and so she couldn't eat because the bad teeth, and we couldn't put her under, and it was even worse because of the thyroid problem. So she had a perfect trifecta. When I tried to give her thyroid medicine to help her, you know, eh, heart and to help her thyroid, then she would stop eating. And when she stopped eating, she kept getting skinnier and skinnier and skinnier. And I did everything in the world to try to get this cat to eat. I would get her the most expensive cat food you could find. I would make her chicken. I would cook rice and mush it up with a spoon. Finally, I found the only thing that she would eat is tuna. And what I would do, and I don't even really like tuna. I like ahi tuna and I like sushi, but I don't care for canned tuna at all. Not it actually makes me gag. But I found that Checkers would eat tuna if I made a little bitty white bread sandwich of tuna and I ate it and I chewed it up and I spit it back out like a little bird. I would feed this cat. And there was one day I was busy and I was rushing. I was trying to get to a show in Raleigh and I was, running late and I'm standing there and I'm got this little bitty tiny, tuna sandwich and I'm taking a bite of it and I'm chewing it up and I'm s- spitting it back out on a, 49 cent a pack paper plate and I'm gagging and this little cat, this little tortoise shell kitty that I've had since she was born in my on my back porch in the laundry room. She's sitting there and she's eating her little wad of chewed up tuna and she's purring and purring and purring and telling me how much she loves me and how good that tuna was. Cuz if it wasn't for that, she would literally have starved. She was always hungry, and that's the only way I could get her to eat. And so I'm standing there that day and I'm late and I'm trying to get her to hurry and eat because I gotta get on the road to Raleigh. And she's eating and I'm chewing tuna and gagging and spitting it back out and she's purring and I'm chewing tuna and spit. And in the midst of this, I look at this 49 cent a pack paper plate and this little skinny, skinny cat and her eating tuna. And I just think to myself, this has to be love. I have to really, 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 really love this little creature to be able to do this, to get her to eat. And she really, 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 really loves me for doing it. Now, that's the first part of the story. The second part of the story was my friend Ngozi. He was a student that worked for me and worked with me at the Health Sciences Library in Chapel Hill, where I had a job for 30 years or so. Ngozi was a tall, handsome young man. His father was a doctor in Nigeria, and they had ended up retiring and living. They lived in Washington D.C. And so, and they had been for Nigeria, especially, they had been an extremely well-off family. And But Ngozi told me this story one day that when he was a baby, and I could only imagine what a handsome young boy he must have been and how proud his mother must have been of him. The anyway, Ngozi told me that when he was little, when he was a baby, that his he had gotten a really, really bad cold, and this is when they still lived in Nigeria. And his mom didn't have one of those little blue bulb things, that they can, suction the mucus out of the baby's nose. And he kept getting worse and worse, and he was having trouble breathing, and he was coughing, and he was just so stuffed up. And finally, his dad took him out on the back porch, and he held him up, and he literally sucked the snot out of his baby's nose. And he hacked it out into the yard, and he did this 2 or 3 times. And he got his nose cleared, and he got over the cold, and everything was fine. And then Ngozi grew up to be this tall, 6'4", beautiful young man that he was. And I was just amazed because I can't imagine my own baby sucking snot out of their nose. And I definitely can't imagine. The reason I tell about Ngozi being from Africa is because I can't imagine a United States dad doing that. I can't, like I said, can't hardly imagine myself doing that. And but Ngozi's dad, he had stepped up when he needed. That was love. There was no doubt in my mind how much Ngozi's father had loved him. I told Ngozi that. That was love. Now, the third part of this story, this is the really personal part. And it's about my dad. For my dad had Parkinson's, and for the last 10 years of his life, he was in various stages of being incapacitated. And there was some times were better than other times. But throughout this time, this 10 years, he was incontinent, both bowel and urinary. And my dear mom, she took care of him at home. Now, my mom's a fastidious woman. She gets up in the morning and she takes a shower, and she puts the kettle on the stove and boils water and then scalds out the bathtub. Like she was dirty to begin with. And throughout this time, my mom took care of my dad at home. There was a couple of times when he had pacemaker put in, and when he fell and broke his shoulder or dislocated his shoulder. He was in rehab for a few months or a few weeks when those things happened. But otherwise, my mom took care of my dad at home. Now, granted, there's lots of us. I was driving back and forth to the mountains like every 2 weeks and staying for, 3 or 4 days, and then coming home back to my house in Bynum. And my sister's a nurse, and my nephew works at the hospital, and I've got a sister-in-law that's a nursing assistant, and so she had a lot of support in the community and the church, and nieces and nephews and aunts and uncles, but throughout that 10 years, my mom took care of my dad at home. And y'all have probably either done this or know somebody that has, and you know how much work that is. And knowing my mom, how fastidious she was, on every horizontal surface in that farmhouse, on every bookcase, on every mantle, on every little Duncan Fife, on the Duncan Fife table in the middle of the living room, there was a box with a roll of paper towels, a box of rubber gloves, and a spray bottle with Clorox water in it. Every single room had at least 2 disinfecting stations. And the night my father passed away, it's actually coming up. He stopped breathing about 5 minutes till midnight on St. Patrick's Day, and at 5 minutes past midnight on March 18th, we called it done. He passed away with me, my brother, my sister, my nephew, my sister, the nurse, and another nephew there, and my mom. And he actually sat up in bed with his last breath and kissed my mom on the cheek and said, "I love you," and fell back in bed and passed. I said shortly after that moment, living a good life is a solace to the dying, and giving someone a good death is a solace to those that are left behind. My father had died a good death. A little bit later, everybody had come. My grand nieces, my nephews, the great grandkids, my uncles were coming. The pastor was on his way. The funeral home had been called. And I looked around as I sat there beside my mom and my sister. I looked around the living room and I saw on that Duncan Five table that box with the Clorox water and the paper towels and the rubber gloves. And I knew that everyone that was coming, all my uncles, the pastor, the funeral home people, they would all know exactly what had been going on when they saw those rubber gloves and that Clorox water and those paper towels. And my mom's a very, very, very private person. And so I got one of those boxes and I started in the living room and I picked up the paper towels and I put them in the box and I went on to the dining room and off the mantle and off the buffet and I picked up the paper towels and the rubber gloves and I went on into the kitchen and the house, it doesn't have a hallway. It just you go from room to room to room. And about a third of the way around, I saw my sister and I said, "Lana, I'm picking up all these paper towels and so forth that my um, that have been there." And she went around the other way, and we met about the den. And she had her box full of paper towels and rubber gloves and Clorox water, and I had my box full of paper towels and rubber gloves and Clorox water. And I literally bumped into her with my box, and I said, "Lana, this right here, knowing how fastidious our mother is and what good care she took of Daddy, this right here, this Clorox water, these rubber gloves, these paper towels, this is love." So y'all know, Valentine's Day was just last week. And I went to the store once. I had to go to Walgreens and get some, Band-Aids and a few other essentials. And they don't do delivery here. So I actually, got Ava Walgreens and every aisle, teddy bears that sing "I honestly love you," and there's M&M candy canes with, pink and white, and there's these big boxes with chocolates that are velvet and got red roses on them. And I thought about all those things, those cards from Hallmark that cost $8 that I thought about all those things. And I said, you know what? That might be Walgreens' definition of what love is, or Walmart's, or Target's, or whatever your, retail choice. That might be their little blue balls that, they use for babies, or it might be a roll of paper towels and a spray bottle with some Clorox, or it actually might be just a regular old can of tuna. That is what I think is love. Thank you guys.